I'd like to explain something at this point, which may be evident, but I want to make sure that it is clear and perhaps develop it a little bit more. People who are now engaged in using popular culture in an academic setting tend to approach that kind of study, that kind of undertaking, in a couple of different ways. Some tend to treat the popular culture itself as the beginning and the end of the material that's to be studied. I am usually not willing to do that. I am not convinced, as good as the material is that we're talking about, I am not always convinced that there is sufficient substance alone to only use the graphic novel or the comic as the text of the course. I think a little bit more substance is needed. Moreover, I believe by pairing particular comic series or graphic novels with specific works of political philosophy, I think we can gain a great deal more from the popular culture, and we can appreciate in a more significant way just to what degree this popular culture is giving us insight into the political philosophy, and the degree to which the political philosophy can help us understand the themes that are being developed in the popular culture. So let's take, for example, a project that Marvel engaged in a few years ago. In 2006, 2007, the publisher started a series, I think it was quite creative and forward-looking, in which a civil war began to develop among all of the superheroes in the Marvel universe. And there were some interesting dynamics to that. One of the things that provoked the Civil War had to do with a new regulation called the Superhero Registration Act, or something close to that. And so there was debate among all of those required to submit to the registration of whether they should or whether they should not. So that was one of the dividing points between one group or the other. And then there were certain characters who were sort of caught in the middle. And we've already taken note of one of the casualties of the Civil War, and that was the assassination of Captain America. There's a lot to explore in this particular series, and there's a lot to unfold. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to make recourse to some of the writing of the Greek historian Thucydides in his History of the Peloponnesian Wars. Thucydides exhibited an astounding insight into human nature, not only in this episode, but in other episodes as well. To read his description of certain events that transpired during that long war, or even series of wars, at times it's sort of like sipping fine wine. That's waited, or that we've waited for 50 or 100 years. This is a level of insight into political and moral philosophy that you just don't come across very easily and very often, perhaps only once in someone's lifetime, if that. And so then there's a way in which the Marvel series can give us insight into Thucydides. There's also a way in which Thucydides can give us insight into this fiction civil war. So more specifically, the context in which Thucydides is talking about civil war is a civil war that occurred in one of the Aegean cities in Corcyra. It was provoked in part by intervention of foreign powers, other Aegean city-states. But his description of what happened during the Civil War to the Corcyrans and the way in which human nature displayed itself, the way in which human nature showed itself, is very important to understand. So at this point, I can really do no better than to read a couple of passages from Thucydides' account of the Corsican Civil War in his history of the Peloponnesian Wars. So Thucydides writes in one place, "The sufferings which revolution," he talks about revolution. Sometimes when he says revolution, he's talking about a dimension of the Civil War, "which revolution entailed upon the cities were many and terrible." And furthermore, the Civil War and the consequences of it spread from one city-state to another. "Upon the cities were many and terrible, such as have occurred and always will occur, as long as the nature of mankind remains the same, although in a severer or milder form, and varying in the symptoms according to the variety of the particular cases. In peace and prosperity, states and individuals have better sentiments, because they do not find themselves suddenly confronted with imperious necessities, but war takes away the easy supply of daily wants, and so proves a rough master that brings most men's characters to a level with their fortunes." So he continues, he says, "Death thus raged in every shape, and as usually happens at such times, there was no length to which violence did not go. Sons were killed by their fathers, and suppliants dragged from the altar or slain upon it, while some were even walled up in the temple of Dionysus and died there." And one more short passage. And in this he explains how words themselves change their meaning. Words had to change their ordinary meaning and to take that which was now given them. Reckless audacity came to be considered the courage of a loyal ally. Prudent hesitation was now defined as specious cowardice. Moderation was held to be a cloak for unmanliness. The ability to see all sides of a question, inaptness to act on any. Frantic violence became the attribute of manliness. Now, I don't know if you get as excited about that kind of material as I do. I think it's extraordinary writing. And what Thucydides is telling us there, and this becomes evident in the comic series, is that there is something about the nature of civil war, the fratricidal dimension to that makes civil war uglier, bloodier, more violent. It engenders more anguish, more hate than other expressions of war. That's an important thing to keep in mind, but it's also historically demonstrable. Look at the course of, for example, the Irish Civil War, and the intensity of the hatred that developed among people who a month before had been enjoying a beer and playing board games or card games. Also consider the Spanish Civil War. Once again, you've got a level of maliciousness that transpired during the Spanish Civil War that is pretty hard to understand, and I dare say that in both situations, both in Ireland and in Spain, those countries, the population, still have not overcome the wounds, the injuries, and the psychological devastation that they suffered during that time. And it may be some time before they are able to put it behind them, if they ever can do so.